Clemson loses again, this time on the road at Miami in double OT. It is a 20-28 loss to the Miami Hurricanes. The Hurricanes get their first home ACC win in the 2 years of Mario Cristobal, and it comes to Clemson. A lot to talk about from a program standpoint. What's going wrong at Clemson, and is Dabo going to take it seriously and actually fix it? But before we get into that, let's talk about this specific game. It used to be that Clemson was finding ways to win, and there were so many examples where Clemson would just come through with a huge play, whether it was 2018 Chase Bryce making a pass when they needed it against Syracuse, or there's just so many examples of that. But now they're finding ways to lose, and in this one, it was a fumble by Will Shipley at the goal line as he's going in. Would have been a touchdown. Fumbles it away. Wasn't even really smacked out in any particularly, defensively impressive way. He just blew it, and they score one play later, right? And that's kind of when you knew it was going to be a long night. And then it was 2 drives later, Klubnik does the same, not on the goal line, but as they're getting close to the red zone, they had a shot at maybe a field goal there. Probably would have attempted it at least and had a chance. He fumbles it away. It's his 5th lost fumble of the year. He leads all players in the country with fumbles, 5 lost. Clemson now leads. They've passed Troy. They now lead all teams with lost fumbles. So, one thing that was really striking to me was in the post game, Dabo Swinney didn't go back to the well with, we're one play away. I've never seen something like this before. He actually acknowledged we deserve to lose. And honestly, that's a step for him, because you have to believe that you're not that good in order to change it. You can't just think you're unlucky. So it's a big change from him to go from we're a few plays away. I've never seen anything like this. The fans, can't expect to. They think we're losers if we don't win the national championship every year. They're only with you win or win. To now apologizing to the fans, right? Big change. So that's good. That's maybe the only good to come of this. Miami did not have their best player. They didn't have Tyler Van Dyke. They had a freshman, Emory Williams, only threw for 151 yards. Not because he wasn't good. I thought he played well, just because they didn't want to take too many shots with him. He had 1 passing touchdown, 1 interception. But I thought they were able to just run the ball and play conservative, and Clemson's offense just kept the defense on the field enough. The defense just wore out. And that is on the defense. They just got run over in that 4th quarter. They had a 10-point lead. You gotta maintain that. So that's on the defense. Really the first time I've got really anything bad to say about the defense in quite a while. They just sort of got out physicaled. I thought the play calling overall was good. Offensive play calling by Garrett Riley, that is. By my count, and I try to keep track of it, they had 9 shot plays. A lot of them, the wide receivers just didn't get the job done. Bo dropped the first one. Just the first 4, the wide receivers were just not coming through and making the plays, whether it was Bo's actual drop or just it was close. It was maybe catchable, but they just couldn't quite get there. Just too much of that. This wide receiver core is who we thought they were, and Dabo Swinney and Tyler Grisham misevaluated them. And that's a big reason, but certainly not the only reason we're here. Now, I have to give them some credit, though, because after a little bit of a slow start, the shot plays kept coming, and they finally started coming through. Antonio Williams had a big catch. Jake Brinkstool had several big catches, including a 50-yard touchdown. Adam Randall only had 1 catch, but it was a 34-yarder, so he finally came through. And Bo Collins, for all the flack I give him, ended up getting a 28-yard catch. So wide receiver group is not who Coach Swinney said they were. And it's really been guys like Brown, Tyler Brown coming through that's really saved the group. But they weren't the problem tonight. Not by a long shot. Shipley had 2.9 yards per carry, only had 44 on the day. And Moffa only got 5 carries, 14 yards, which is 2.8 yards per carry. They both posted bad PFF grades in the 50s. Didn't look great, not explosive. But the problem is the offensive line. There was just no room for them at all. And here's how it looked by PFF. So, I watch the offensive line as much as I can, but it's hard to track them through a whole game. Here's what PFF had to say about them or grade them. Tristan Lee at 58.5, not good. You want to be at least in the 60s. Marcus Tate was the only one that played decent at 66.5. Putnam a really bad 52.4. Mitchell Mays, another really bad game at 42.9. Blake Miller has regressed, it seems, from last year at 58.6. So just not a good performance from this offensive line. And what's so concerning about it is most of these guys are returning starters, or at least 3 of them, I should say, are returning starters. Parks is hurt. But Blake Miller last year posted a 71.8 PFF grade, down to 65.2 this year. So regression. Marcus Tate, a little bit better, 63 last year, 65.8. So a little bit of development, but not a ton. Mitchell Mays didn't start last year, but posted a 57.8 in snaps as a backup. That's all the way down to 46.7. And Putnam, 67.3, goes down to 65.1. Putnam pretty good in pass blocking, horrible run blocking. Same for Tate, same for Lee. Mitchell Mays, the reverse, only a 20.5 rating in pass blocking. Horrific pass blocking, a little bit, I mean, relatively speaking, better in run, but still not great run blocking. So you're not seeing player growth. You're not seeing progression. So, a lot of these guys are going to be back. Parks will be back. Putnam's gone, but, Blake Miller, Tristan Lee, Marcus Tate are all probably back next year. But does that mean this line's going to be good? We're not seeing them get better every year like you would a lot of lines. So we'll jump back to that. But I did want to say, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. For those who have subscribed, please like this video. I'd really appreciate it. All right, let's zoom out a little bit. Let's take a look where we are this season. So, I had Clemson I had Clemson with no losses to this point. I originally thought NC State would be a lot better than they are. And so maybe that was a trap game or kind of a tire. But here we are. Clemson's lost to Duke, then played 2 easy, 2 bad teams, picked up 2 wins, lost to Florida State, then played 2 bad teams, picked up 2 easy wins. Now they've lost to Miami. And you look ahead, NC State is pretty bad. Already giving up on Brennan Armstrong, turning it over to MJ Morris, the quarterback. Their offense might be even worse than Clemson's. I'm not sure their defense is as good. Nothing's a slam dunk with Clemson right now, but you would think if they're focused, if they can refocus and not sort of give in, that's a probable win. And then Georgia Tech's pretty bad. Everything else is a bit of a toss-up. So here's what we're looking at rest of season. I think they beat NC State. They really should beat Georgia Tech as long as they don't quit. South Carolina on the road is a rivalry game, but right now I'm going to give it to Clemson. But they're looking at a 7-5 year, right? And you go back to 2010, they were 6-7. This team looks a lot like that. When you look at some of the skill position players on the 2 teams, you have Kyle Parker, you had Cade Klubnik. Is Cade that much better? You had Andre Ellington, you have Will Shipley. I think Ellington was better. You look at the receivers, you have Bo Collins, you had like Xavier Dye and guys like that. That team had Nuke Hopkins, but he was a freshman, didn't really play. The skill position players just really aren't there this year. And, what's unfortunate is, I really thought this is bad, but maybe they can win 8-9 games this year and then use the portal slightly, maybe 2 guys on defense, a wide receiver, and they'd be okay. But I think it's a lot deeper than that. And Dabo's really going to have to come to terms with either he's going to kind of go out like Bobby Bowden and fade away until he chooses to retire, and Clemson will fire him. So they might just be this kind of team until he leaves, or he's going to have to make some big changes. And let's look at a huge difference from the team they were when they were ascending to into greatness to the team they've become now, sort of the bottom as they've went all the way back down to where they were kind of at the start of the Swinney era in 2010. So you kind of bottomed out in 2010. You had the whole mountaintop experience, the decline, and now we're back at the bottom. Let's look at the coaching staff. So quarterback, Streeter versus Riley. I really do not blame Riley. He just doesn't have the tools around him. But, talking about player development, let's look. You have Tony Elliott, you go CJ Spiller, Jeff Scott versus Tyler Grisham, Danny Pearman, who was a bit of a punching bag, but you go to Kyle Richardson, who they got from the high school ranks. Robbie Caldwell, who, again, another guy that we gave a lot of flack, but now we got a guy who spent 2 years at Georgia State, Thomas Austin. Defensive tackles, Dan Brooks was a proven veteran. I actually really like Nick Eason. Defensive ends, Marion Hobby, to much less experienced Lemanski Hall. Venables, obviously hard to compete with him, but Wes Goodwin, and then Mike Reed. Mickey Collins joined the staff since then. But let's see where they came from. This is what I find so unbelievable. This is what I want to spend a little time talking about. I've broken down the current staff into 3 groups. So there's Dabo's friends and former players, guys who he went outside of his normal process, and you'll see just how far outside of the normal process he went to bring them in. Then you have guys who he hired from his kind of analyst pool, but they're not buddies or favors. They're guys who we brought in as analysts. They did some time as analysts and then eventually earned a spot on the coaching staff. And then there's external hires, right? So let's start on the far left. So former players. CJ Spiller was a former player. He's now been on staff. This is his third year. He spent 1 year as a grad intern. He was coaching high school track, and he became a coach, right? So very little experience required because of his relationship with Dabo Swinney. Tyler Grisham. He's been on the staff for 4 years as a former player. He spent 6 years, 2 as a GA, 4 as an analyst. Then he got the role. So spent a little bit more time, but no experience with other staffs. Didn't go to Georgia State or a place like that. Thomas Austin. He's been on the staff for 2 years. He's a former player. He spent 4 years as a GA here, or I should say at Clemson, not here. I'm not in Clemson at the moment. He went to Georgia State, so he actually got away, which is good. Spent 2 years there as the offensive line coach, where he did a pretty good job. Then he came back, spent 1 year as an analyst. So not as egregious as the other two, but not a guy you could have went out and got an extremely experienced guy who's proven it at a school like Wisconsin, right? They chose not to. Lemansky Hall. This is a guy who was a teammate of Dabo Swinney's at Alabama. He was an assistant coach at a high school in Tennessee. They brought him in. He spent 3 years as an analyst, and they promoted him in 2018. Mickey Kahn, he was another guy. He was a teammate of Dabo Swinney's. He was at least a GA at Alabama, not at Clemson, and he was a head coach, not a assistant coach at the high school ranks. Then he spent 1 year as an analyst. He's been on the staff 7 years, so don't give him as much slack. But let's see how sort of the standard for what it takes to get hired changes as you get a little further away from Dabo Swinney on a personal relationship standpoint. Richardson was a high school head coach for years and years, one of the best in Rock Hill. And then he still spent 6 years in various support staff roles. Compare that to Grisham, who came right in 6 years and he's got a job. Richardson spent years and years and years as a head coach at the high school ranks. Wes Goodwin, he spent 6 years as a GA and analyst at Clemson. Then he went 3 years in the NFL. Then he came back for another 4 before he got promoted. So much longer track record required before he got that job as compared to the friends and family kind of plan. And then you look at these external hires. When Dabo Swinney wants the best, he can get it. He can do it. He's not incapable. Clemson is still, for the brief time we have left, if he doesn't choose to pivot, is still a great destination. He gets Garrett Riley, who has 10 years of experience at other schools, 3 as an OC, and won the 2022 Broyles Award. Literally went out and got the best guy you could, the reigning Broyles Award winner. Nick Eason, he's been on the staff for 2 years. He spent 7 years coaching in the NFL and a year coaching the defensive line at Auburn. You went out, yes, he's a Clemson alum, but that's just a bonus. That's not why you hired him. He went out and got a great hire, and he's doing a good job. Mike Reed, he's been on the staff 11 years. He's possibly Clemson's best assistant. He spent 2 years at Richmond, 5 years in the NFL with the Eagles, then 6 years at NC State, and then Clemson plucked him away, right? So Clemson can get elite assistants. They just have to want them. So you compare that to Kyle Richardson and Wes Goodwin. Those guys, I think they're doing a pretty good job, but not like those other 3. And then you look at the friends and former players. Spiller, he's actually done a really good job recruiting. I don't have as big of a problem with him. But Shipley doesn't seem to be getting any better. Moffitt maybe marginally so. Fumbles are still a problem. We'll see what happens when David Ajamame comes in next year, and hopefully Jay Haynes gets some run. But not seeing a ton of progress from the running backs. I don't think they're anywhere near the biggest problem, and the recruiting's good. So to me, that's more of a bad process than a bad coach, right? You look at Tyler Grisham. Again, you bring in a former player that you have a relationship with, you throw him in the analyst pool for a while, and then you hire him instead of going out and getting an elite wide receiver coach, which you could have. And of course, the wide receiver play has been abysmal. Now, they've got some great wide receivers coming in next year. Maybe it's not his fault. The recruits that Jeff Scott left him with, a lot of those guys transferred out. EJ Williams, Frank Ladson, Ajo, and they didn't do anything where they went either. So maybe it's not his fault, but bad process once again. Thomas Austin. This is a guy I thought the process a little bit better. At least he spent 2 years at Georgia State. But players are not getting better. And now you're seeing they're having trouble recruiting because they're not developing players and sending them high into the NFL. So, they bring back basically everyone from their O-line except for Jordan McFadden at left tackle, and the O-line's worse. How's that possible? And now they're going to do it again. They're going to bring back everyone except for Will Putnam at center. I don't know that the offensive line's going to get any better. that's a spot that's not looking great right now. Always liked him as a player. And this is the weird spot you put yourself in when you make a reach to hire a fan favorite, a former player. What are you going to do now? Lemansky Hall, another one. He's a personal friend, former teammate of Dabo Swinney. He hires him with very, very minimal experience, only 3 years as an analyst, never a college, major college assistant or anything like that. And the defensive end play, you've got 6th-year player, former 5-star Xavier Thomas, not showing a ton of progress. You have Justin Maskell, 6th-year player, former 4-star. He's okay. Maybe showed some progress, but still not a big-time player. Before that, you had Miles Murphy. Didn't get any better from 1st year to 3rd year. A big 5-star player who for 4 years wasn't much of a contributor. Very end of that redshirt junior year, he starts to contribute some. He has one good year, so 1 out of 5 years. That's not really what you want. I mean, good for him. He's a great leader. I like KJ Henry, but that's not like a success for Lemansky Hall. And, with the guys they're bringing in, Darian Mayo is an exciting one, but I think you're going to have to go to the portal at defensive end. There's really no way around it unless you want to start Kay Denhoff. It's troubling when your best players are freshmen. And TJ Parker's the best defensive end on the team. Miles Murphy was best when he was a freshman. Now he was probably the best defensive end they had, arguably, that year. So that's a concern. Mickey Kahn, I actually think he's done a great job. Don't love that process, but at least he was a head coach at Grayson in Northeast Atlanta or suburban Atlanta for a long time, was really good there. Spent some years as a GA at Alabama before and a GA at Clemson, or not GA, but an analyst at Clemson, at least for a year. They hire him. I think he's done a pretty good job. So I have less problem with him. He's recruiting well too, but it's bad process. Just when you compare these 3 columns, you could see the far right, those are elite hires performing at an elite level. The middle, okay hires, don't have a big problem with it, but not great. On the left, questionable hires, questionable performance. And this is the type of thing that's not, okay, we'll take a transfer wide receiver. No, Dabo messed up. Dabo got a little bit overconfident in his ability and thinking it was all about him. And it's not. It's about the whole staff. And so this is the type of mentality that has to change. So what about next year? First of all, again, if you haven't already, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. So what's next? What's next? So you look at next year and you're going to need maybe an interior lineman, or you're going to need to develop the guys that are here now. There should be a lot of guys coming back, but they're not developing. So you either got to make a bet on development, and you can't keep being wrong on that, or you got to bring someone in. Wide receiver, you're either going to make a huge bet on Bryant Wesco or TJ Moore being a starting outside receiver because they just don't have a real boundary receiver at all. I mean, Bo is the guy who's there, and he's not a bad player. I'm not undercutting him or saying anything bad about him. He's just not a number one. And, the other guys are slot receivers, really. So they really got to go out and get someone, or pray that there's no freshman, mistakes or learning curve at all for Wesco and Moore. And I think that's a little bit wishful. Defensive end, I think that's the most obvious place. You're going to lose both your starting defensive ends for the 2nd year in a row. TJ Parker's awesome. He'll start. But then who do you have on the other side? Denhoff was a very, very highly recruited guy, but as is the story with a lot of these guys, especially the guys who are coached by these inexperienced coaches, Denhoff hasn't really developed as we expected. Sierra Patterson, maybe a transfer risk. He's not playing at all, and he hasn't developed as we expected. We expected him to be a guy who can contribute, and he's not. So I think defensive end is the most obvious spot where you see a transfer come in. If not, then Dabo is just against it at all costs. And then maybe linebacker. We'll see if Trotter comes back. I think Carter's definitely gone, but if Trotter comes back, you got Sammy Brown coming in. You still have Woodaz, so maybe you don't need one there. If Trotter comes back, it's safety. You have Sherrod Koval. You have Tyler Venables coming back from injury. Makuba's probably gone. Don't know who you're going to use. Maybe RJ Mickens stays. Maybe he goes. If he does go, you probably should bring in a transfer. So that's a lot of guys, a lot of spots. And I just don't know if Dabo's willing to do it. So you either got to make changes to be better at development or bring in guys who are more developed. So let's end on something more positive, though. And I hope you'll stick with me through this. Clemson basketball is going to be better than Clemson football. I say that with some confidence. And it's not hard to say because Clemson football is, a 7-5 type team with 5 of those wins coming against really bad opponents. So it's not a big leap to say Clemson basketball will be better, and I think they will be. Hunter Tyson's gone. That's a huge loss. He was a phenomenal rebounder, phenomenal three-point shooter, and overall scorer. Tough to replace him. Brevin Galloway was a bit of a chucker, but an overall good player, very good physical defensive wing. And then Ben Middlebrooks was kind of a surprise transfer, a center who left to go to NC State. So what does Brad Brownell do? And look, Brad Brownell has not succeeded often at Clemson. He's got maybe 3 years that you feel good about, maybe 1 or 2 really, in 13 years. So I'm not saying he is a better coach than Dabo Swinney. He is most certainly not. But what he is doing is everything he can, everything in his power. And so what he did is he lost those 3 guys and he went right back out and he replaced them with Joe Girard, one of the best scorers in the ACC, highly sought after transfer. LSU wanted him. He made the pitch, got him to come from Syracuse to Clemson. He is a top-notch three-point shooter, made 88 threes last year. He's going to make that off. He makes up for the shooting that you lose with Hunter Tyson. They bring in Jack Clark from NC State. He'll score, around 10 points a game, but he's also going to be great on defense. He makes up for the loss of Brevin Galloway, maybe even more than that potentially if he could take a step. So you get him from NC State, almost like a trade with Ben Middlebrooks. And then Middlebrooks didn't play a big role, but they went ahead and filled that role anyway, bringing in Bass Light from UNC Greensboro, a big, tall guy who could defend and rebound. And then they added freshman Asa Thomas, a 6'7" guy out of Illinois. So Clemson loses some guys. They see the holes. They immediately go to the portal and they replace them with guys who are possibly better. Hunter Tyson's great, so I don't want to undermine him at all. But Clemson went out and did with everything they could to get better. And that's why I appreciate Brad Brownell. He never gives you coach speak, never lies, and is doing everything he can. Now, they've got to have some player development. PJ Hall's got to take the step. The offense is going to run through him. He's got to be a star. Chase Hunter's got to stay healthy. He's got to be consistent. When he's on, he is great. But all the pieces are there. This could be a really good offensive team. And winning a game in the NIT or being on the fringe, and not making an NCAA tournament, it's just not going to be acceptable this year. This has to be the year that Clemson breaks through. I think if they don't make the NCAA tournament, you have to move on. It's just played its course. This is the year where it's a very veteran squad between guys like Hall and Hunter to all these transfers they brought in. They're going to lose a ton after this year. Next year's team's going to be probably pretty bad. I mean, they'll go to the portal to avoid being awful, but they'll take a step back. This is it. This is the shot. This is the payoff year. Clemson fans who have waded through a lot of brutal years, this is the year you see the payoff. If not, the era probably should end. But I really think this team has a chance to make the NCAA tournament and possibly win a game or 2. So a lot to look forward to there. The season starts right after the Notre Dame game. And frankly, the way football season's gone, it can't get here soon enough. So hopefully the Tigers can at least win the Textile Bowl this Saturday at 2:00 on the CW in Raleigh. And then we'll have basketball season soon, which hopefully gives us something a little bit more hopeful. Till then, thanks for watching.